Lean has been around for quite some time. And I like this diagram for what is lean. The glass is half full, the optimist. The glass is half empty, the pessimist. Why is this glass twice as big as it should be? The lean thinker. It's all about removing waste. And you'll hear me say the word waste quite a bit. And that's where I guess lean got its roots from. And also during the 80s and 90s, transformations for lean was all about removing waste. And sadly about removing FTE, which is what it's not really designed for. But I understand the 30% gains that you can achieve from a lean transformation. When we talked about Henry Ford, and I did say they had a good run to the 50s and 60s. Why did they start to decay? Because Ford only had one way of doing things. One color, one type of machine. It was a push system. They would push onto the customer and they would hope the customer would buy it. Now, innovative products tend to sell to people who really want them. The iPhone, nobody asked for. It was pushed onto us, and yet it was amazing, so we liked it. But now, as you can see, Samsung and Huawei are doing much better. Now, Mr. Toyota created a system of pull. It allowed the customer to choose which color they wanted. And then when they chose a red ute, for instance, another red ute was created. And that pull system, yes, it was less efficient than the system that Ford had, but it was more productive because customers' experiences and needs were met more regularly. Mr. Deming went over to Japan to see what this was all about. And he had some theories already. And when he went over to Japan and saw what Toyota was doing, which was called the Toyota production system, wasn't lean, he came back and he recreated, because I think he already had this already, the plan, do, check, act cycle, or the plan, do, check, study cycle. It's been named quite a few different things. But the idea is that you take from the pull system and you can continuously improve your system over time. And what Mr. Deming realized was they were planning, yes, they were doing something, then they were checking to see if it worked or not, and then they would pivot or persevere, i.e. keep what they tried and throw away what didn't. Between the pull system and the plan, do, check, act system, Toyota did very, very well. You may have heard of waste, but most of the waste you've actually heard of is muda, which is a non-value adding activities. And there are 7 forms of them. You may have heard them be called the 8 forms of waste, but this is normally a mixture between muda and muri. So muda is about the waste of non-value adding activities. Muri is about overburdening. Now this could be systems, but it also could be people. So literally missing out on opportunities from your employees. And then mura, which is the imbalance, uneven, or irregular. So these concepts were all around in the 50s and 60s. And yet we're finding that they're not very apparent even today. We talk about lean as just one system. Some people talk about lean as just Kanban. Lean has a lot of different elements, and that's the reason why there are lean courses. And it's not something that I will go into detail about because it is a course in itself. But just be aware, lean was not created by Toyota. It was the Toyota production system. Toyota production system had a pull-based system with continuous improvement built in. Okay? With lean, it came from the idea of muda, muri, and mura. And this is about basically efficiency. It's an efficiency system that was forever improving through the plan, do, check, act cycle. And if you remember those 2 things, you're onto a winner. So here's a quick overview of the 7 forms of waste. Transport, moving things. Inventory, having too much inventory is a waste because you have risk of losing it. Motion, moving or walking when not required. I'm sure Frederick Taylor would love that. Waiting, And we've all had this, right? You pass it over to the next team and they have to wait. That time waste there is an inefficiency lag. Overproduction, producing more than what actually required, can cause you having to sell them at a discount. It's a waste. Over-processing, so adding more features to something that the customer does not want is over-processing, and it's a waste. And defects. These are things that you may, because you want to get something out fast, you just go ahead and make it live. Or you're going to have to replace them at some stage, or the warranty is going to have to come out of your budget. So there's 7 forms of waste. You don't have to memorize them all, though I will be testing on a couple of these that are quite important. But it's good to be aware of the different types of waste. So here's a HR onboarding scenario. As you can see, the candidate search goes on, there's a maintain resume database, there are interviews, negotiating offers, and onboarding. This is a standard process, and inside any process you can find waste. There's more than one waste in here. But as you can probably see, there is a waiting waste between the maintain resume database to background verification to scheduling interviews. So candidates are waiting. I bet they don't feel great for waiting. The selection process is a waste because it's manual instead of automated. And negotiating offers and onboarding is a time-consuming human waste or potential. You can find these wastes everywhere, on every single process. I used to be a business process engineer, and when we worked on Six Sigma process re-engineering, every process had waste. But sometimes it's not worth fixing them. And yes, you may be able to fix a process and make it more efficient, but if it costs you more than the benefits of fixing that process, it's not worth doing. And that's something to be aware of. Lean is fantastic for finding the most efficient way of doing things, but it's not always the most productive or profitable. Kanban. I love Kanban. I do. It's my favorite framework, methodology, whatever you want to call it. I love Kanban. The main things to remember with Kanban is it's a pull-based system. Okay, so it's customer-driven, pull-based system. It's really about seeing the visibility of your entire process. So imagine mapping out your entire process from the HR example, and then just seeing how many candidates are in every stage. Right, that would be it, and then you'd pull to the next stage, right? So they say it was invented from the Japan hot pool system. So you get a ticket, and you go to the hot pool, and when you come out the hot pool, you give the ticket to the next person who would go in there. So it's controlling the flow of people. I mean, nowadays we have a lot more sophisticated ways of monitoring progress of how many people are in hot pools, but back then, I presume that was probably the best way. I like the example that Spitfires had a 2-bin system in World War II. Now, I don't think they even knew that this was actually Kanban, but when a Spitfire was shot down in World War II, a new one was produced, which went to the next bin. They didn't overproduce Spitfires, because they didn't know how many they would need. So to manage the waste of materials, Spitfires were only created upon the destruction of another Spitfire. So a 2-bin system. You may have heard of the 3-bin system, and that's really supermarket shelves. You'll see it all the time. If you would go to a supermarket and you would take all the items off a shelf, that item would trigger the items out the back to be brought in. When they're empty, that triggers an order from the system, and so on. And this is the reason why a supermarket may seem very efficient. It's also the reason why during COVID-19, if the disruption of this just-in-time delivery is disrupted for 3 days, there could be no toilet paper. There could be no food. It's a very good system for efficiency and therefore for profit. But if the system's disrupted for any period of time, there is a loss of customer value. And this is something we need to think about now, especially supermarkets going into disrupted globalization. Toyota, as a way of achieving just-in-time delivery, the Toyota production system, it never created too many cars. It created just the right amount at just the right time for just the right customer. It is a great system of just-in-time. supermarket Spitfires, Toyota. You can see why just in time can be very profitable as long as the system is risk averse. Think of it as a one-piece flow as opposed to lots of parts. So what I like about Kanban is the visibility of it. As long as all the work is inside the Kanban board, and this is an example of a Kanban board, you will find you can see bottlenecks very easily. As you can see, you've got a backlog of work, and we spoke about backlogs already. You've got work in progress limits top there. In progress has 3, peer review has 3, in test has 1, and then done and blocked. It doesn't actually matter what these look like. Just remember it's a one-piece flow going through, and each column is part of the process. As you can see, peer review has 3, but it only has 2 in there. And that's because it's a pull-based system. They can't pull enough from the in progress. Therefore, the developers of value are probably under capacity, right? So that showed us in a few seconds that there's a problem in the in progress column. And that's where visibility of bottlenecks is so important. So if you want to start your own Kanban board, it is really simple. I used to do a speech on this in 20 minutes, but you can actually get through this in that 5. Start with what you know and visualize it. Don't worry about all the tricks of the trades and all these new things you want to do. You may not have heard of Kanban, and if you haven't used Kanban, think of your to-do list. I find most people, especially leaders, have a to-do list and they're working in the Kanban method already without even realizing it. Just start with what you know and visualize it. Get the process, all the stages it goes through, and then visualize. Agree to change incrementally. Have no fear. Okay? You're going to make small changes frequently. And what do I mean by this? It means you're going to start with what you think is the best way, or how you do it now. And then you're going to test little things. Should the work in progress limit be more or less? Should I have more people or less? Should I add a step here or not? Small changes. Don't dramatically change things. But think about the word Kaizen. Zen, towards perfection. You never quite get there, but you're heading in that direction. Continuous improvement, Kaizen, is vastly important to Kanban. So step 3, we're going to respect the current roles and responsibilities. Don't go changing it. Don't create a Kanban master or some weird titles that make no sense to you. All you're using Kanban for right now is to continuously improve, create a pull-based system, have one-piece flow, and to incrementally improve. So respect your current roles and responsibilities. Even if someone like me goes, oh, cross-functionality, cross-collaboration, all these other crosswords, don't worry about it. Just keep on your current roles and responsibilities. Create a work in progress limit. Per column preferably, but at least overall. We're only going to go through so many features at any one time. We're only going to go through so many stories at any one time, whatever you call them. Create work in progress limits. Have each Kanban card, Kaizen card, work piece card, whatever you call those pieces of cards that, the actions, tasks, make them similar size. It will make reporting and your life much easier. And why is that? Because if you want to measure your cycle time and lead time, you just want to look at pieces of work being complete. Otherwise, you get into complicated things where you've got to ratio it against the amount of work being complete. And then it gets into a different argument. And if you're new to this, I really believe keeping them the same size or choosing Scrum. But Kanban's my favorite. So try and use Kanban, try and keep them similar size.